We've defined culture over the last couple of weeks, couple of Wednesday nights that we've been together. And what we've done is we've taken a look at an ancient culture via the story of the prodigal son. And tonight we're going to go through some scripture and we're going to look at the time in each adult's life, each parent's life, when their kids are of an age where they either become the prodigal son or the older son. I guess those are the two choices. Teenagers, when they grow up, somehow get a mind of their own. And that mind is, is influenced by, in their formative years, by their parents, by the church, hopefully. They're raised in a Christian family. But when they hit that age where they're out on their own, that's where the wheels could come off. And that's really what we want to talk about for the next 2 weeks, is raising Christian children, or continuing to raise, I guess, Christian children in an atmosphere of the world. Because no matter how much we guard our children, no matter how much we train our children, no matter how much we adhere to Proverbs and raising up a child in the way that he should go, sometimes when they leave home, they do go. And parents have to be prepared, and parents have to know the struggles of other parents, and that's really kind of the reason that we decided to visit this subject, is to help those who are raising kids and those who have already raised their kids to act as advisors to these kids in their formative years. It has always mystified me why those of us who are older don't teach high school, junior high classes where we can talk to these kids and we can give them the benefit of our troubles that we had when we were growing up. Unless you're one of those few fortunate ones who never had any problems when you were growing up. You were that child. I wasn't that child. I was anything but that child. So let's begin by looking in the Old Testament. And these are some names, and this is the 2-week period. This week and next week is the 2-week period where you talk. I've talked for the last 2 weeks, and I'm tired of talking. Now, I have notes up here to talk to get us through to the top of the hour, but I don't want to have to get through these notes. What I want to do is put some ideas out there and let you talk about those ideas. If I said the name of Nadab and Abihu, what's your first thought? They were the sons of who? Sons of Aaron. Therefore, they kept the fire, Leviticus 10, verses 1 through 3. And it is said in Leviticus 10 that they offered what to God? They offered strange fire to God. So in their culture, there was an appropriate way to do things. There was an appropriate socially acceptable or a socially permitted way that you were to worship God. He'd laid that down for them. He had told them exactly how you are to worship, what you wear when you worship, how you come to worship, how you do the worship service, how you sacrifice. He had explained everything. God has never been obsequious. He's never kept secrets from us. He's always been very plain about what he wants us to do, then as now. And so Nadab and Abihu offered strange fire to the Lord. They offered a fire that was not what God wanted. And what was the punishment? They were consumed by God. They were consumed. A lot of other things in the Old Testament, under that Old Testament Mosaic dispensation, sometimes we read these things, especially in Leviticus and in Exodus, and we read some of these things, and also Deuteronomy, some things that really give you cause to pause. And if you look at Exodus 21, verses 28 and 29, it talks about if your ox gores someone, what happens to the ox? It gets stoned. Now what happens to the owner? Nothing. Nothing happens to the owner. Now, if that ox gores someone again, and I'm reminded of these people who let their pit bulls run free and they attack people, if your ox gores someone a second time, the ox and the owner are stoned. And that's part of their culture. That's part of what God has laid down for them as part of their social organization. Look at Leviticus 20:27. If you were a necromancer or a medium, what happened to you? You were stoned. Look at Leviticus 24. We'll call this one up. Leviticus 24. In Leviticus 24, beginning about verse 10, there's a punishment for blasphemy. Now, someone define blasphemy for me. What is blasphemy? Taking whose name in vain? Speaking against God, taking God's name in vain, cursing God. And so we see here in Leviticus 24 that an Israelite woman whose father was an Egyptian, what's the first problem? They married outside of what God had told them, how God had told them to marry. In Leviticus 24th chapter, verse 10, we have an Israelite woman's son whose father is an Egyptian, and they fought in the camp. They aired their dirty laundry out in public where everybody could see it. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name of God, Yahweh, and cursed. Verse 14 is the verdict. Let all the congregation stone him. And so whoever curses God's name, verse 15, whoever curses God's name shall bear his sin. Whoever blasphemes the name of God shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him, the sojourner as well as the native. When he blasphemes the name, he shall be put to death. We've come a long way since then, and not in a good way. I hear people routinely take the Lord's name in vain, as if it's just a part of their vocabulary. And I hope that's not a sin that you wrestle with. I hope it's not. My favorite, however, is Deuteronomy 21:18 through 21. You have a rebellious child. You have a rebellious child. The law says that you take that child out to the city gates where the elders sit and tell the elders that you have a rebellious child, and they stone him to death. A culture for a different time. A strict culture. The prodigal son was another example of that strict culture. But now let's switch to cultural change for just a moment. Let's look at some cultural change from the Old Testament to the New Testament. That period in between, that testimonial picture, that period between the testaments, between the Old and the New. From history, what do you know happened in that period of time between the last verse in Malachi and the first verse in Matthew? What do you know happened in the world at that time? Great changes came about during that period. Great changes in the culture. Great changes in their technology. Great changes in their social organization. Great changes in their religious affiliations and constructs. So what happened? Anybody have one? I have five. Well, I have six. No, I have five. I have five. Okay.
Made sure that they got rid of their wives that weren't Hebrews.
Okay.
And from Ezra, probably some think that the Pharisees
as a result of that? Okay. That was one of the things that led to that period in time. There became sects that had never been seen before. S-E-C-T-S, not X-E-S-E, not sexes, sects, S-E-C-T-S. There were sects that developed that had never been in the Old Testament. You read in the New Testament of sects that you never see in the Old Testament. Can you name a couple of them, 3 of them, 2 of them, any of them? The Pharisees, the Sadducees, okay? The Essenes, they were another group that came about. They came about in order to more distinctly, according to Ezra and Nehemiah, to more distinctly interpret the scriptures. So the synagogue, which you don't ever read about, you read about the temple, but you don't ever read about synagogues. Synagogues also came about in this intertestamental period between the Old Testament and the New. One of the main things that happened during this period in time between the Testaments is that Alexander the Greek conquered the known world. And he brought with him a very Hellenistic or a Greek interpretation. Greek became the language it was the lingua franca. It was the language that everybody spoke. Everybody spoke Greek. Philosophers, culture, language, all came from this Hellenization. And it deeply influenced the culture that Jesus came into when he was born. It was deeply influenced. How were they able to travel as much as they were able to travel in the New Testament as opposed to in the Old Testament? It was because of the Romans. The Romans had built roads. They had built aqueducts. They had built buildings. They had changed the socio-political landscape such that when Jesus came, all of these things were possible. The Bible even talks about the fact that Jesus came at the exact right moment. He came at the right time. And when he came at the right time, it was in part because of all of these things that had occurred. Now, one that not many people think about is the Maccabean rebellion. During this time between the Testaments, there was the Maccabean revolt. It was a Jewish rebellion against the Greek oppression, and there could be a whole class taught on that. But if you are interested in the Maccabean revolt, you can read about that. But again, social organization and religion are clashing in these things. The social organization of the Greeks and the religion of the Jews clashes. It reinforced the Jewish identity as a separate people. It also stiffened their backs with regard to outside influences that came into the Jewish world. They took a fresh perspective on foreigners and people that would come into their country. And finally, I put down language and communication. Again, Greek was the lingua franca. The spread of the New Testament was written in Greek. It became to such a point as everybody could read, and in most instances write. So we have this picture of an Old Testament culture and between the Testament's culture. Now we just shortly move to the New Testament. What is the one story that's told in the book of Acts that lends itself most to a cultural dynamic, if you will? Somebody that did something that they weren't supposed to do. Bought a piece of land, set aside part of it, told the apostles they'd sold it all. Are we getting warm? What do you think? Ananias and Sapphira, Acts 5. So this was a very early example of Christians doing something they shouldn't do. They had told the apostles that they were going to give them full value for this land. And they kept back part of the money and said, no, this is the full value for the land. And both of them, as you remember, dropped dead. What we look at is mankind's changes in social organization, in religion, and technology over time. And that's really what we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about. So we'll move up to the modern day, and we'll come back. If you would be turning to Ephesians 4, we're going to spend the lion's share of our time probably next week, and as much as we can get to today. But just put your finger in that, and we'll come back to it. There is a book that I would like to recommend that you read if you haven't already read it. It should be, as far as I'm concerned, it should be in everyone's library. It's a book by Phil Sanders, and it's called Adrift: The Church in the Postmodern Generation. And I see heads nodding, so there are some people in here who have read this. It's a wonderful book. He talks about the fact, and I've used a few of his quotes tonight in putting this lesson together. He talks about churches today or in the religious world, churches having no rudder. And a rudder gives a boat the ability to do what? To go somewhere. And with the postmodernists, the phrase that's most often used is, well, your religion is good for you, but that's not really good for me. And churches and preachers, not only within the church, but outside of the church primarily, have taken this, and they've taken it and run with it. They have really taken free will and taken it out to the most extreme degree. Many of the things that he talks about in the book, in this book, Adrift, talk about the church, these churches today that have no rudder. They're just adrift. They're blown about by every wind of doctrine. You've heard that in Sunday school class. So they hear one thing and they glom onto it because it's new and it's fancy and it's different and it's modern and it's the hip way to do things. And we'll get people we'll fill the pews because we're doing this, even though that might not be something that the Bible has laid out as a plan of worship. God has been very specific about that. Now, there's one thing I want to make really clear. While technology changes, while social organization changes, and while religion changes, the religion of this book never changes. It is the same as it was yesterday. It will be the same as it was tomorrow. God has not given us any new revelation. He has given us sufficient revelation for us to convert the world. We don't need religion to change. But when I talk about religion changing over time, what I'm talking about, and I want to be very clear on this, when I talk about religion changing over time, is it's man's influence. It's man putting his fingers in the pie and changing something that God did not ordain us to change. So the Bible remains fixed. It's unchangeable. It remains the way it was when it was written today. And so if we talk about some of these things, we talk about this, Brother Sanders talks about the fact that there's no rudder on this ship, this religious ship. It also has no anchor. It has no anchor. And for the Christian, what is the anchor of the soul? It's hope. Hope is the anchor of the soul. It's our hope. It's our hope that causes us to live for Christ. And finally, he says they have no North Star. And that North Star is Jesus. They're trying to navigate using something that's not reliable. You can always count on the North Star. You can always count on Jesus. So he talks about all these things in this book, and he talks about a lot of the changes that have occurred in the world with respect to religion, reminding us in John 14:6 that Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me." That's very plain. But yet as religions change over time, they will tell you there are other ways to get to Jesus. You're just going your way, and I'm going to go mine, and we'll all meet in heaven. Well, no, we probably won't. Because there's one way, there's one truth. And so as we begin to look at these agents of absolute moral theological freedom, the anything goes church. You can have your religion, and I'm going to have my religion, and you can have your religion. And everything's okay. And there are those out in the religious community that believe that this very day. There are those who believe in absolute theological freedom. They believe in what's called the new hermeneutic. You've heard preachers talk about that, on and on about that. We are to say no to sin, and we're to say no to the devil. We're to use the Bible as our North Star to take us to Jesus. We're to use the Bible as our anchor. We're to use the Bible as the rudder that we use to sail this church toward heaven. There are those out there who feel like that free will is something that you can take advantage of. Free will is something that, for some people, they just refuse to grow up. And as your kids go out into the world, those of you who have children, and this is an older audience, but there will be those who listen to this who have kids. It's so important that they understand these things about the world as they go out into it, because there's a world out there that doesn't care about God. There's a world out there that doesn't care about the Bible. There's a world out there that doesn't care about Jesus or the plan of salvation. And it's incumbent upon us as we go out into the highways and the byways to teach these folks. And sometimes it becomes very difficult because they have a mindset. And we're going to talk a little bit about that mindset as we go on tonight. So, nothing is wrong. Everything is right. It's just the way you want to do it. Your beliefs are your beliefs and mine are mine. This is the group that have what's called the Peter Pan syndrome. They want the respect without doing the work to gain that respect. And so they make changes and they look at things. And what I want to do is spend the remainder of the time that we have together tonight addressing these changes in cultures and how they affect the church. So let's talk first about technology. What is one thing, I'm going to go out on a limb, what is one thing that probably everybody in this audience has either in their purse or in their pocket? A cell phone. My great-grandmother, who lived to be 106, came to Arkansas in 1899 in a covered wagon. She died in, she was 106, 1899, 1900, I don't know, you do the math. I didn't go to math school. But I was there when she passed away, and she told stories about the first horseless carriage that came to Searcy, Arkansas. Talked about the first horseless carriage. Imagine the changes that she saw in her life. I've seen a man walk on the moon. Now, that may not be a big deal to some of you who are younger, but if you weren't around in 1969, we missed evening church services because my dad thought that was important enough for us to see that was such an event. We missed Sunday evening church services. And maybe it wasn't that important because we could see it now, but I saw it live. And that was something else. The number of changes that you've seen in your life technologically. Would you ever believe that a phone this size contains more power than the first Apollo rocket that went into space? This has more technology built into it than that Saturn I had built into it. Good thing or bad thing? What's the good? What's the good thing about having a cell phone? Okay. I can call and talk to my loved ones around the world. I can reach out to talk to people. I don't have to see it. My granddaughter lives in Minneapolis. She doesn't talk right now, but FaceTime's really nice. So I get to see her walk. I get to see her do all those things that I wouldn't ordinarily be able to see her do. What's the bad? What's the bad? It can become an obsession. It can become an addiction. It can actually become an addiction. I have sat in this congregation service at Lehman Avenue and at here. And I've sat in the back of the auditorium and I've watched people play games all during church service. Now, I'm not going to point any names out, but they do it. I'm not sure if that's worshiping God in spirit and truth. They have to decide that for themselves. Well, what the internet? I can get the internet on my phone. I have access to a world. How many of you have used Copilot or any of the AI? Any of the AI things? There's something else. Now, that's a whole different class of talking about that. But let's just talk about the internet. Good or bad? Good or bad? Okay. What's good about the internet? Information at your fingertips. Copilot, I've used it to pull up this list of changes in the world between the Old Testament and the New. I'll be honest with you, I use Copilot. I just ask it, what are some of the cultural changes that took place between the Old Testament and the New Testament? Spit them right out. Didn't take it 30 seconds. I probably had 2 weeks of searching through the literature to find that. Found it in 30 seconds. Well, I didn't find it. Copilot found it. That's a good. If we use it in the right way, what's the bad? What's the bad? There's a lot of evil out there. Did you know that prior to the advent of the internet, despite what Al Gore says, prior to the advent of the internet, pedophiles were localized to individual areas, and they had very little contact with pedophiles in other cities. It would be happen chance that they might exchange a mail. That's that thing you put a stamp on and you put it in your mailbox. No? Okay. The internet has allowed them to become interconnected now, where sex trafficking, child trafficking, all of the horrid evils, all through the internet. Technology. It changes faster than the other two. What about science? It's allowed us to look into the depths of space. Have you seen some of the pictures from Hubble up against some of the pictures from the Webb telescope? Go home and look up the Webb telescope and look at some of the astounding pictures that display God's glory in all of its magnificence. It will give you chills in places you didn't know you could get chills. It's absolutely phenomenal. Science has also given us evolution, to such an extent now that evolution has become a god to some people. They worship evolution. They worship the tenets of evolution, even though it's still just a theory. Some people take it as gospel. What about the automobile? That's a technological wonder. Cars that drive themselves. Cars that fly. Just around the corner. Just around the corner. What have we been able to use the car to do? And you could use airplanes as the thing. What have we been able to do with automobiles and cars and the technology we've been given as Christians? What have we been able to do? We've been able to spread the gospel like we've never been able to spread it before. Look at the budget that we have for this congregation. How much of that is spent on ministers and missionaries in other lands? And you can get on an airplane and go see them. Some places you can drive here within the United States. You can drive to see them and worship with them. Technology is a wonderful thing. But how do we address these to our children as they get to this age where they're going to be exposed more and more and more to the world? Because you just can't put a leash on them and carry them around. They're going to develop their own minds. They're going to develop their own thoughts. They're going to develop their own plans of action once they get out of your house. And as we learned in our first 4 lessons, to raise up a child in the way that he should go is so important for that after period until they get old and will not depart from it. All these cross-cut one another. Technology, social organization, religion. So we looked at something like the phone or the internet. That's a technological piece. How that changes our social organization is nothing less than profound. How many of you remember a time when there was no social media? I know I do. You had to write a letter, or you had to pick up a phone. And maybe that phone was on a party line. And maybe there was somebody talking on the party line. You couldn't get out. You had to wait. Technology affects our social organization. Technology affects our religion. It allows us to spread the gospel in ways that we've never been able to do before. So let's look at social organization. Social organization. What are we talking about with regard to social organization? Remembering that all three cross-cut one another. Social media, I already mentioned that. That's a thread that runs through all of our societal. Someone asked me the other day, well, are you active on social media? I said, no, I'm not. When I was working, I was on LinkedIn, and if you know what LinkedIn, that's for business people. A lot of people make it a political platform, but it's supposed to be just a business. But even the social media has crept into LinkedIn, where people are offering opinions on things and getting requests and getting likes, and that's what they live for. They live for those likes. It's like heroin. They need that like. They need to be appreciated. They need to be wanted. They need to be loved. They need to be thought well of. I would maintain a Christian doesn't need that. Is social organization bad? It's like everything else. It has good aspects. It has bad aspects. Good aspects, it can get you a better paying job. Bad aspects, it can ruin you should someone decide to say something or publish something that you supposedly did. I read a recent story about a girl who's she was a college girl, and a rumor started in her sorority, something very bad about her. And it ruined her. She had to leave school. Her life's ruined. The internet, we talked about that already. This is the one subject where I stop teaching and I start meddling. Fashion. You know where I'm going. I've seen people come to church. Shouldn't come to church like that. Shouldn't come to church dressed like that. That's all I'm going to say. Apostle Paul said these things ought not be so. Fashion. You have to be popular. You have to be on that cutting edge. You have to be on that bleeding edge of fashion. You got to wear the right clothes, or you're not a part of the group. Do we have cliques at Lehman? Do we have cliques at Lehman? I'd say we do. I know I'm not part of any of them, but I'm sure there are some out there. I've seen them. People who only talk to certain people. You walk by, they may say hi to you, but 9 times out of 10, they just ignore you. They'll just walk right by you. That may not be a clique. They just may be having a bad day. Instrumental music. Crosscuts our social organization. Technology goes right into our religion. Goes right into their religion. What do you come to church for? Worship or entertainment? There are those who say there's nothing wrong with instrumental music. Oh, we don't have the time to talk about that tonight. 1 Samuel 8 and 20. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 20. The people wanted a king. Why'd they want a king? So they'd be like everybody else. That's what the world is full of today. People who want a king. They want to be just like everybody else. They'll spend their last dime to be like everybody else. It's called fashionable Christianity. It's those who want to live on the cutting edge. They want to have the best stuff. I don't know how you felt. I don't know how you felt. And I'll just say my piece, and this is how I felt. When we were at Lehman, and I went to the elders and I told them, just told them as frankly as I could. I don't like those songs coming up on the screen. Is it not scriptural? No. It's a matter of what? It's a matter of opinion. My opinion as a song leader at this congregation for over 20 years was, I don't like that. And I told the elders. And I never said another word about it. And there have been other things that I talked to the elders about. I always go to the elders because one of the things that God hates most is what? Those who sow discord among the brethren. Folks, don't ever do that. Go to an elder, talk to an elder. Don't be a gossip. Don't be a poop starter. If you have a problem, go to the elders. It's something you'll like. That's what I did. I didn't go around to 15 people and stir something up. I just basically said, I don't think that's right. And that's because I'm old-fashioned. A song leader ought to lead songs. And I think people ought to use their songbooks. Most of the people now don't even know what a songbook is. You ask them to reach under the thing and get a songbook. They don't even know what they're getting out. That's just me. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world culturally and loses his very soul? Paul tells us in Romans 12 that we're not to be conformed to this world. And that goes for our children. Our children are not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is acceptable, good, and perfect. Are we perfect Christians? No, we're not. But we're trying to be transformed by the Word. Communication experts tell us that in this lesson tonight, you will remember 7% of the words I spoke. You will remember 38% of my tone of voice. And you will remember 55% of my body language. If we only understand 7% of the words spoken, we can't very well argue people into heaven. We need to be meek, we need to be understanding, but we need to be firm when we talk about the Word of God. We can say the kindest words to someone, but if we speak them through clenched teeth, we're not going to have any effect on them. And we've got a world to save because time is short. We're not promised the next minute. I mean, we're on my watch. We're not even promised the next minute. But we are promised that that's the second bell. And so next week what we'll talk about, and I want you to think about this for a while, is please read Ephesians 4 and come prepared to have a discussion about what Paul talks about in Ephesians 4 with regard to the world, how we're supposed to conduct ourselves in the world, things that we need to pass on to our kids. And that will be my last session. And then we'll turn it over to Roger for the last 4 weeks of the class. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.